Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept gripping the mug like it might anchor me to something solid. Across from me, Pierce drummed his fingers on my kitchen table while Jace scrolled through his phone, both of them wearing that particular brand of impatience that comes with thinking your father has lost his mind. "Dad, you're doing it again," Pierce said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone he'd perfected since turning 32. "That look, like you're solving some grand mystery." I set down the mug carefully, the ceramic making a soft click against the wooden surface. "I'm not solving anything. I'm just trying to understand what your mother was doing in that office for all those years." Jace looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Oh, here we go. The great office conspiracy theory returns." "It's not a conspiracy theory." I kept my voice level, measured. "It's a simple question about why she spent so many late nights there, why there were cash deposits I never understood, why she always changed the subject when I asked about her work." Pierce leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Dad, Mom ran a small bookkeeping business. She helped local shops with their taxes. Sometimes that meant working late during busy seasons. Sometimes clients paid in cash. This isn't rocket science." "Then why did she always seem nervous when I brought it up?" "Because you made her nervous," Jay said, not looking up from his screen. "Constantly questioning someone tends to do that." The words hit harder than they should have. I'd been careful, hadn't I? I'd never accused Margaret of anything, never pushed too hard. I'd simply wondered quietly about the inconsistencies that seemed to multiply the longer I thought about them. "I never questioned her constantly," I said. "I asked maybe 3 times in 15 years. 3 times too many, apparently," Pierce muttered. I studied my son's faces, looking for some trace of the boys who used to listen when I spoke, who used to trust that their father might occasionally have valid concerns. Instead, I saw 2 men who'd already decided I was a grief-stricken widower, clinging to imaginary problems. "Look, Dad," Pierce continued, his tone softening into something that might have been kindness if it weren't so condescending. "I get it. Mom's gone and you're looking for answers that might help you feel closer to her. But creating mysteries where none exist isn't healthy." "Creating mysteries?" I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting the accusation. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Aren't you?" Jace finally set down his phone and looked at me directly. "Mom dies of cancer, and suddenly, you're convinced she was hiding some dark secret in her little office space. It sounds like grief talking, not logic." I wanted to tell them about the lease renewal notice I'd found last week, addressed to Margaret but dated 6 months after she'd supposedly closed the business. I wanted to explain how the math had never quite worked on her claimed income versus our actual household expenses. I wanted to describe the way she'd flinched whenever I mentioned stopping by her office unannounced. Instead, I said nothing. The silence stretched between us like a chasm I couldn't bridge with words they wouldn't believe. "Maybe you should talk to someone," Pierce suggested. "Dr. Morrison, maybe? He helped you after Mom's diagnosis." "I don't need therapy. I need to understand what happened in that office." "Nothing happened in that office?" Jace's voice rose, frustration finally breaking through his casual dismissal. "Mom kept books for Mrs. Chen's restaurant and Thompson's auto shop and maybe half a dozen other small businesses. She made decent money, she worked hard, and she died too young. That's the whole story." "Then why won't either of you come with me to look at the space?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I'd been asking for weeks, suggesting we go through Margaret's old office together, sort through whatever remained of her business records. Both sons had found excuses every time. "Because there's nothing to see," Pierce said finally, "and because watching you chase ghosts isn't something I particularly want to do on my weekends." "Ghosts," I repeated. "Yeah, ghosts. Imaginary problems. Conspiracy theories about Mom's perfectly normal small business." Pierce stood up, pushing his chair back with more force than necessary. "I love you, Dad, but this obsession isn't healthy." Jace nodded, pocketing his phone. "Pierce is right. You're looking for drama where none exists. Mom was honest, hardworking, and devoted to this family. End of story." They left together, talking quietly in the driveway before driving away in separate cars. I remained at the kitchen table, staring at the 3 empty coffee mugs, and wondering when my sons had stopped believing I might occasionally know what I was talking about. Later that evening, I pulled out the lease renewal notice again. It was dated March 15th, 2019. Margaret had told me she'd closed her business in October 2018, 6 months earlier. When I'd asked about the notice, she'd said it was just paperwork lag, nothing important. But the notice wasn't for closure. It was for renewal. For another 2 years. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the manila envelope where I'd found it. Tomorrow I would call a contractor about renovating the office space. Not because I wanted to create drama or chase ghosts, but because some questions deserved answers, even if my sons thought I was losing my mind. The next morning brought rain and the kind of gray sky that made everything look slightly unreal. I sat in my car outside Margaret's old office building, watching water streak down the windshield and trying to remember the last time I'd actually been here. It had been 3 years ago, maybe 4. Margaret had been inside, working late again, and I'd stopped by with dinner from that Chinese place she liked. She'd met me at the door, taken the bag with a quick kiss, and sent me home with promises that she'd be back before 10. She hadn't arrived until nearly midnight. The building looked smaller than I remembered, a narrow 2-story structure wedged between a dry cleaner and a vacant storefront. Margaret's office had been on the second floor, accessible through a separate entrance on the side street. The landlord had been surprisingly helpful when I'd called, confirming that the space was still available, and that, yes, Margaret's lease had indeed run through 2021, nearly 2 years after her supposed business closure. My phone buzzed. Pierce. Dad, what's this about you calling contractors? I'd left a message with Thompson Construction that morning, asking for estimates on some renovation work. Apparently, word traveled fast in a town this size. I'm thinking about fixing up Mom's old office space, I said. Maybe turning it into something useful. Useful how? I haven't decided yet. Maybe a workshop. Maybe just storage. Pierce's sigh was audible through the phone. Dad, that's a waste of money. If you want a workshop, we can clear out part of the garage. If you need storage, there are facilities all over town. I want to see the space first. Understand what's there. What's there is an empty office with old carpet and probably some water damage. You're talking about throwing good money after bad. I watched a woman hurry past on the sidewalk, umbrella bent against the wind. It's my money to throw. Is it, though? I mean, technically, sure. But, Dad, you're not exactly rolling in cash. Mom's medical bills, the funeral costs, the fact that you're still paying off the house. Maybe this isn't the time for expensive renovation projects. The concern in his voice might have been touching if it hadn't felt so much like control. Pierce had always been the responsible one, the son who balanced checkbooks and made sensible decisions. But lately his helpfulness felt more like supervision. I can afford to renovate one small office space, I said. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're spending money you don't have to chase answers that don't exist. From where you're sitting, I repeated. And where exactly is that, Pierce? Another sigh. Look, I'm not trying to manage your finances. I'm trying to keep you from making decisions you'll regret later. Like what? Like finding out what your mother was actually doing for the last few years of her life? Like convincing yourself she was doing something other than exactly what she told us she was doing. The conversation was heading toward familiar territory, the same circular argument we'd been having for weeks. I could predict Pierce's next 3 responses, just as he could probably predict mine. I have to go, I said. The contractor's meeting me here in 20 minutes. Dad, please, just think about this rationally for a minute. But I was already hanging up, already stepping out into the rain. The contractor, Bill Thompson, arrived exactly on time. In a white pickup truck, with his company name painted on the side. He was a man in his 50s with calloused hands and the kind of straightforward manner that came from 30 years of fixing other people's problems. You're Margaret Renwick's husband, he said, shaking my hand. Sorry for your loss. She was a good woman. Thank you. Did you know her well? Well enough. She had me do some work on this place a few years back. Nothing major, just some electrical updates and a fresh coat of paint. He looked up at the building, squinting against the rain. What are you thinking of doing with the space? I'm not sure yet. I'd like to see what kind of shape it's in first. We climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, my key still fitting perfectly in the lock. The door opened onto a small reception area that led to a larger back office. Everything was exactly as Margaret had left it. Desk, filing cabinets, a small table with an old coffee maker. Bill walked the perimeter of the main office, running his hands along the walls and checking the windows. Structurally, it's solid. Some cosmetic issues, but nothing serious. He paused at the back wall, knocking gently with his knuckles. Huh. What is it? This wall sounds different. Thicker than the others. He knocked again, moving along the surface. You know if there was any major renovation work done here recently? Not that I'm aware of. What kind of work? Hard to say without opening it up. Could be nothing. Could be someone added insulation or ran new electrical. The sound is just different. I stared at the wall, painted the same neutral beige as the rest of the office. It looked perfectly ordinary, unremarkable in every way. How much would it cost to find out what's behind there? Bill shrugged. Couple $100 to open up a section and take a look. If there's nothing interesting, we patch it up and move on. If there's something that needs addressing, we deal with it then. And if I wanted to renovate the whole space, depends what you have in mind. Fresh paint, new carpet, maybe update the electrical outlets. You're looking at maybe $3,000-4,000. Nothing too crazy. I nodded, still staring at the wall. When could you start? Next week, if you want. I've got a crew finishing up a kitchen renovation, but after that, we're free. We shook hands again at the bottom of the stairs. Bill promised to email me a detailed estimate, and I promised to call him by Friday with a decision. That evening, Jay stopped by unannounced, letting himself in through the back door, the way he'd been doing since high school. Pierce told me about your renovation project, he said, settling onto the couch without invitation. Did he? He's worried about you. We both are. I was getting tired of hearing about their worry. I'm fine, Jace. Are you? Because from the outside, it looks like you're spending money you don't have to investigate a woman who can't defend herself. Investigate? The word stung. Is that what you think I'm doing? Aren't you? Jace leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Dad, I get that you miss Mom. I miss her too. But she's gone, and whatever questions you think you have about her business. They died with her. Maybe they don't have to. Yes, they do. Because the alternative is you spending your retirement savings to prove that the woman who raised us and loved us and took care of this family for 30 years was somehow lying to us. What if she was? The question escaped before I could stop it, hanging between us like a challenge. Jace stared at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then what? He said finally. Let's say you're right. Let's say Mom was hiding something. What exactly do you think you're going to accomplish by digging it up now? I might understand why she seems so scared all the time. Scared? Mom wasn't scared. She was terrified, Jace, especially the last few years. She jumped every time the phone rang, always checked the locks twice before bed, never wanted to go anywhere without telling me exactly when she'd be back. She was sick. She was scared before she got sick. Jace was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his expression had hardened into something I didn't recognize. You know what I think, Dad? I think you're the one who's scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of facing the fact that Mom is really gone. Scared of moving on with your life. So instead of dealing with your grief like a normal person, you're creating this elaborate fantasy where Mom was some kind of criminal mastermind with dark secrets. That's not what I think, isn't it? Because that's sure what it sounds like. He left without saying goodbye, the back door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat alone in the living room, listening to the silence and wondering when my family had become strangers. But I didn't change my mind about the renovation. The call from Bill Thompson came on a Wednesday morning, while I was reading the newspaper and trying to pretend my life still had normal rhythms. I've got that estimate ready for you, he said. Also had a chance to do some research on your building. Turns out there was some work done on your wife's office about 4 years ago. Electrical permit was pulled, but the work was done by someone else. Different contractor. What kind of electrical work? Hard to say from the paperwork. Could have been anything from new outlets to a complete rewiring. The permit application was pretty vague. 4 years ago. That would have been 2018, around the time Margaret claimed she was winding down her business. I tried to remember any mention of electrical work, any disruption to her schedule or complaints about contractors. Nothing came to mind. I'd like to move forward with the renovation, I said, including opening up that back wall. You sure? Once we start pulling things apart, there's no going back. If we find problems, the cost...
Second Instagram, 47 posts, all of her. You built her a shrine. You posted her on my birthday.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
cost could go up pretty quick. I'm sure. We scheduled the work to begin the following Monday. Bill warned me that the first few days would be mostly demolition and assessment, messy work that would make the space temporarily uninhabitable. I told him that was fine, that I wasn't in any hurry. Friday afternoon, I drove to the office to take one last look at it in its original state. I wanted to remember how Margaret had left it before we started tearing things apart in search of answers that might not exist. The space felt smaller with all the furniture still in place. Margaret's desk sat in the center of the main room, its surface clear except for an old desk lamp and a small ceramic pencil holder I'd given her for Christmas years ago. The filing cabinets lined one wall, their drawers locked, keys long since lost or misplaced. I'd been through the desk drawers weeks ago, finding nothing more interesting than old receipts, business cards, and a few personal items Margaret had kept at work. A small mirror, a packet of tissues, a tube of hand cream that still smelled like her. But I hadn't been able to open the filing cabinets, and suddenly that seemed important. If I was going to renovate this space, I should know what records might be inside, what documents might need to be preserved or properly disposed of. The locksmith arrived within an hour, a young woman who had the cabinets open in less than 10 minutes. "Anything valuable in there?" she asked, packing up her tools. "Just old business records," I said, though I hadn't actually looked yet. She left me alone with 3 unlocked filing cabinets and a growing sense that I was about to cross some invisible line between concern and invasion. The first cabinet contained exactly what I'd expected: client files, tax documents, business correspondence dating back nearly a decade. Margaret had been methodical about record keeping, each file neatly labeled and organized chronologically. The second cabinet was more of the same, though the files were older, some dating back to when she'd first started the business. I recognized a few of the client names, local businesses that had closed or changed hands over the years. The third cabinet was locked from the inside. I stared at it for a moment, trying to understand what I was seeing. The locksmith had opened the main cabinet lock, but this one had a second locking mechanism inside, a small metal bar that prevented the drawers from sliding open. I called the locksmith back. "That's unusual," she said, examining the internal lock. "Someone really didn't want these drawers opened. This is the kind of thing you see in offices that handle sensitive financial information. Legal documents, maybe, or confidential client records. Can you open it?" "Sure, but I'll have to drill out the lock mechanism. There won't be any way to lock it again afterward." "That's fine." The drilling took longer this time, metal shavings falling onto the floor as she worked. When the lock finally gave way, the drawer slid open with a soft whisper. Inside were files I didn't recognize. Client names I'd never heard Margaret mention, business correspondence with companies I couldn't identify. The letterhead on most of the documents read M. Renwick Consulting Services, not the Renwick bookkeeping that I'd seen on all her other business materials. I pulled out a handful of files and spread them across Margaret's desk. The documents were recent, most dated within the last 3 years of her life. But they weren't bookkeeping records. They were contracts, agreements, payment schedules for services I couldn't identify. One file contained bank statements for an account I'd never seen before. The deposits were substantial, far larger than anything Margaret's bookkeeping business could have generated. Thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands. arriving on irregular schedules throughout 2018 and 2019. My hands were shaking as I photographed the documents with my phone. Whatever Margaret had been doing in this office, it wasn't what she'd told us. The evidence was right there in black and white, impossible to dismiss or explain away. I was still sitting at her desk, staring at the bank statements when my phone rang. "Dad?" Pierce's voice sounded strained. "I just drove past Mom's office building. Your car's there. What are you doing?" "I'm going through some of her old files." "What files? I thought you said the office was empty." I looked around at the scattered documents, the opened filing cabinets, the evidence of Margaret's secret business spread across her desk. It wasn't as empty as I thought. "Dad, you're scaring me. What did you find?" The question hung in the air between us. I could hear the genuine concern in Pierce's voice, but also something else. Fear, maybe, or dread. I found bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. I found business contracts for services I can't identify. I found evidence that your mother was running some kind of consulting business that she never told us about. Silence. Then, "Dad, please don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Don't turn Mom into something she wasn't. Please just put the files back and walk away." "Put them back?" I stared at the documents scattered across the desk. "Pierce, these are records of financial transactions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money that never made it into our household accounts. Money from sources I can't identify. How exactly am I supposed to put this back and pretend I never saw it? Because whatever it is, it doesn't matter anymore. Mom is gone. Her business is closed. Whatever money she made or didn't make, whatever clients she had or didn't have, none of it affects us now. It affects me. It affects how I understand the last 15 years of my marriage." "No, it doesn't." Pierce's voice was getting louder, more insistent. "It affects how you choose to remember Mom. And right now, you're choosing to remember her as a liar. I'm choosing to remember her as she actually was, not as I thought she was. And what if those aren't the same thing? What if the woman you thought you knew was exactly who she wanted to be, and this other stuff? What if it was just something she had to do?" The question stopped me cold. "Had to do? Pierce, what do you know about this?" Another long silence. When Pierce spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I know that Mom loved us. I know she worked hard to take care of this family. And I know that sometimes people have to make difficult choices to protect the people they love." "What kind of difficult choices?" "The kind that are better left buried, Dad. The kind that don't need to be dug up and examined and judged by people who weren't there when the choices had to be made." I stared at the phone, trying to process what I was hearing. "You knew. You knew she was hiding something. I knew she was doing her best in a complicated situation." "What situation?" "Pierce, what the hell was your mother involved in?" "Nothing illegal. Nothing that hurt anyone. Just business that she preferred to keep private." "Business worth hundreds of thousands of dollars?" "Dad, please, just put the files back and walk away. Trust me when I tell you that this isn't something you want to pursue." But I was already past the point of walking away. The bank statements alone raised too many questions, and Pierce's obvious knowledge of Margaret's secret business only made those questions more urgent. "I'm renovating this office," I said, "starting Monday. If there are more answers here, I'm going to find them." "Dad, don't do this. Please. You're going to destroy everything good you remember about Mom, and for what? For answers to questions that don't need to be answered? They need to be answered for me." I hung up before he could respond. Outside, the afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across Margaret's desk. I carefully gathered up the documents and locked them in my car, along with the key to the office. Monday couldn't come soon enough. Bill Thompson and his crew arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, their truck loaded with tools and tarps and the kind of controlled chaos that comes with tearing things apart professionally. I'd spent the weekend moving Margaret's furniture into storage, leaving the office space empty except for the built-in filing cabinets and that mysterious back wall. "You sure you want to start with the wall?" Bill asked, setting up a work light in the main room. Usually we do cosmetic stuff first. Save the big unknowns for last. I'm sure. He nodded and marked a section of the wall with chalk, a rough rectangle about 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall. We'll start here. If there's something interesting behind there, we'll know pretty quick. The first hammer blow echoed through the empty office like a gunshot. I stood in the doorway, watching Bill's crew methodically punch through the drywall, revealing the wooden framework underneath. Definitely something back here, called one of the workers, a young man whose name I hadn't caught. Looks like a false wall. There's maybe 2 feet of space behind this section. Bill stepped closer, shining a flashlight through the hole they'd created. Yeah, this was definitely added after the original construction. See how the framing is different? Someone built this wall to hide something. Hide what? Only one way to find out. They worked for another hour, carefully removing sections of drywall and exposing the hidden space behind. What they found was a narrow room, maybe 8 feet wide and 6 feet deep, accessible through a section of wall that had been designed to swing open like a door. Well, I'll be damned, Bill said, stepping back to survey their work. Someone went to a lot of trouble to keep this space secret. The hidden room was empty except for electrical outlets that had been installed along the walls, and what looked like mounting brackets attached to the floor. The whole space had been carpeted in the same industrial gray as the main office, and the walls were painted the same neutral beige. Any idea what it was used for? I asked. Bill walked the perimeter of the space, examining the electrical work and floor mounting points. Hard to say. The electrical setup suggests some kind of equipment was stored here. The mounting brackets could have held anything from filing cabinets to machinery. What kind of machinery? Could be anything. Computer servers, maybe. Industrial equipment. Without seeing what was actually mounted here, it's impossible to know. I stood in the entrance to the hidden room, trying to imagine Margaret working in this space, trying to understand what kind of equipment she might have needed to hide. The bank statements I'd found suggested substantial income from unknown sources. This room suggested infrastructure for activities she'd never mentioned. My phone buzzed, a text from Jace. Heard about the renovation, can we talk? I ignored it and focused on Bill's crew as they continued their examination of the hidden space. The electrical work is recent, Bill said, checking the outlet installations. Maybe 3, 4 years old. Professional job, too. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Is there any way to tell what was plugged into these outlets? Not really, but based on the amperage, it was something that drew significant power. More than your typical office equipment. We spent the rest of the morning documenting the hidden room, taking measurements and photographs. Bill promised to research the electrical permits more thoroughly, see if he could identify the contractor who'd done the work. I was locking up the office when Jace appeared on the sidewalk below, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Dad, Jace, Pierce told me about the phone call, about what you found in Mom's files. I finished locking the door and started down the stairs. Did he? He's worried about you. We both are. So you keep saying. Jace fell into step beside me as we walked toward my car. Dad, I need to tell you something about Mom's business. I stopped walking. What about it? It wasn't what she told you it was. I figured that out already. No, I mean, it wasn't what any of us thought it was. Not even Pierce and me. I studied my son's face looking for signs of deception or evasion. Instead, I saw something that looked like guilt. What do you know, Jace? I know that Mom was scared the last few years of her life. Really scared. And I know that whatever she was doing in that office, she was doing it because she felt like she didn't have any other choice. Choice about what? Jace looked around the empty street as if checking for eavesdroppers. Dad, there are some things about Mom's past that she never told you. Things from before you met her. What kind of things? The kind of things that don't just go away because you want them to. The kind of things that follow you around for decades, demanding payment. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Payment for what? I don't know all the details. Mom never told us everything. But I know that someone had leverage over her, some kind of hold that kept her working for them, even after she wanted out. Working for them how? Jace was quiet for a long moment, staring at the office building. Dad, what did you find in that hidden room? Nothing, it was empty. Empty now. But the electrical setup, the mounting brackets, it was designed to hold equipment, wasn't it? I nodded slowly. Gaming equipment, Jay said quietly. Slot machines, poker tables, maybe some kind of betting operation. Mom was running an illegal gambling business out of that office. The words hit me like a physical blow. I leaned against my car, trying to process what I was hearing. How long have you known this? We suspected for years. The late nights, the cash deposits, the way she always seemed nervous when you asked about her work. But we didn't know for sure until after she died. After she died? Someone called the house. A man. He said he was sorry for our loss, but that Mom's debts didn't die with her. He said the family would be expected to honor her obligations. What obligations? We don't know. Pierce hung up on him. But Dad, the call came to the house. He knew where we lived, knew Mom was dead, knew about the family. Whoever was controlling Mom's operation, they're still out there. I stared at the office building, trying to imagine Margaret upstairs, surrounded by gambling equipment, taking bets from people I'd never met. The woman who'd made me promise to never buy lottery tickets because gambling was a waste of money. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because we hoped it would just go away. Because Mom was dead and the operation was shut down and we thought that would be.